Ever have one of those days where you feel like you just need a break? Well, a couple of weeks ago, I had one of those days. It was on the heels of some really tough days in the office, and I just needed to touch grass. Every day on my way to court in Clay County, I take Highway 11, and at the end of the road, I go left. Well, on that day, I texted my supervisor asking for the rest of the day off, and I went right. And this video is going to be the story of that day. So I had my Leica M6 with me and a roll of Luminar 100 film, which I've got right here. This is a film stock that I've not shot before, and this is from a company called Popho. It's got really nice branding, the packaging looks really sweet, and much like other products that we saw on the market over the past year, this is Kodak Aerocolor IV, which is an aerial photography film. And as the video goes on, we're going to talk a little bit more about this film stock and many of the characteristics that it exhibited. And this is the same stuff on the market right now. Color 100, we've seen videos about that, also Filmwashi X, and then Film Elector 100. But there's several companies out there repackaging this film, although under different brand names. But make no mistake, it's all the same stuff, Kodak Aerocolor IV. There are no medium or large format options available for Luminar 100, just good old-fashioned 35mm, which is just as well, because that's all my Leica M6 would take. I pulled off onto the side of the road at a service station that looked like it had definitely fallen into a state of disuse, and it also looked like maybe someone was living there at the time, kind of crudely fashioned into a house of some sort. And these were some of the first couple of shots that I took with Luminar 100. And this photo sort of tells the story of Eastern Kentucky. Yeah, there's desperation, but there's also pragmatism and ingenuity. You get a little closer, you can take a look at this old dwelling. No front door, copper had already been stripped inside, and there's definitely no one living in there now. And as we continue on through the video, I should point out that I'm shooting all these images on my Leica M6. I should probably also tell you about the lens that I'm using here, and I was using the Voigtlander 35mm 1.2 version 3. An interesting note about the color characteristic of these Voigtlander lenses, at least to my eye, and I'll show you some before and after. You know, I've done some color correcting on these. A lot of these Voigtlander lenses tend to color more towards the magenta end of the spectrum. It's very, very evident when you shoot, especially with this 35-1.2 and the already kind of reddish hues that I've seen online people are getting from Luminar 100. There's a definite red, warm kind of magenta cast to a lot of these images, but it's pretty easy to correct in post. And it's interesting because that may just be something kind of inherent in Voigtlander lenses. For the longest time, I shot a Voigtlander 50mm f2 on my Sony. It's their manual focus, ultra sharp, probably the sharpest lens I've ever owned. So I think that may be something that Voigtlander's doing with their coatings. They're kind of shifting everything towards that magenta red into the spectrum. Just something to be aware of. After taking those shots, I got back in the car and I went on down the road, continuing deeper and deeper into rural Clay County. And let's be clear, this is one of those areas where a little lot trespassing may open up a new homicide case in Clay County due to the problems with theft and poverty and people stealing catalytic converters and copper wiring from the houses. There's definitely that sense of desperation. Undeterred, I continued on, kind of surprised when I looked over and found an abandoned barrel racing ring. I guess an arena, maybe, right? Looked like it hadn't been used in a really long time. Things were grown up, but my business partner's really into horse racing, so I thought about going and snapping a few shots. And like I said, everything did appear to be in disuse. Unfortunately, that's going to be a theme as we continue on throughout this video. But these shots here, they really aren't my finest work. The road ran just alongside that barrel racing course. I couldn't really get above it to get kind of an angle to be able to kind of show you exactly what it was, but the shots were fine. Not my favorites though. And you could see with the Voigtlander 35mm, stopped down a little bit, the lens is just bitingly sharp. All the lab scans and development here in this video were done by the darkroom, and they did a wonderful job. But you can tell, looking at these photos, tons of detail left on the negative. These could have been scanned at higher resolution and there would have been plenty of detail there. So, and that's probably a good time to talk about the film. It is Aerocolor IV, which is a 100 speed film. Taking a look at Kodak's data sheet for the film, they list its granularity index at RMS 8.5. And basically what that means, according to Kodak's data sheet, is the grain is exceptionally fine, leading some to speculate that the film's negative may actually contain more detail than slide films like Velvia 50. But enough about all that nerdy stuff. And these are some of my favorite shots of the entire series, and these are one of the reasons why you drive these old rural roads in Eastern Kentucky. They're just these incredible views, just people living lifestyles and a way of life that's just not that common anymore. To be clear, by this point, I'm 30 minutes in either direction or more away from any sort of population center, any sort of town. And it's just always impressive to me to see that people still live out here in these areas. And I knew these were going to be really cool shots. I spent a long time walking around the road with my 35mm trying to find the right framing. And truthfully, I would have liked to have had something just a little wider, but this was as good as I could come up with. kind of the road and this fence leading off into the distance, and the wonderful fall Kentucky color at the time as well. Just up the road from here, I found this old mobile home that was completely encumbered by kudzu. Kudzu, for those who don't know, it's an invasive species that was brought to the south from Japan. And this image is an example of what can happen if you don't keep the stuff trimmed back. It will just overgrow everything. It's insane. Oh. And just up the road from that, there was a bridge going across a stream, and I always like to shoot these shots looking down the stream into the distance, and these made some really good shots. I may have been a day or two behind peak fall color, but you can see there was still quite a bit of foliage left in the trees, and the colors were just really, really bright. They were popping. And you could see it was a little bit windy that day, and lots of leaves had fallen that day. You can tell by how they're kind of blowing around the road. And something else that's important to note is you can tell how few cars travel these roads. Look at all the leaves laying there. And for a lot of these shots, especially the ones where you see me kind of standing in the road and framing the curves going off into the distance, a lot of these shots, I'm just parking in the road. The roads out there have so little traffic that you could just park for 20 minutes and probably not see another car. We're talking very rural. LA traffic can suck it. And this shot here is really interesting. It's not so much a great photographic work of art, but it's just interesting to see this rock hanging over the road. Apparently they couldn't find a better way to do this, so they just kind of cut into the rock and put the road right through there. Really interesting to see. And here's a simple test of the Sunstar capabilities and a dynamic range test of the camera and lens combo. If you've watched this channel for very long, you know that I'm a sucker for a great Sunstar, and these Voigtlander lenses with their straight aperture blades never disappoint. It's one of my favorite things about the lenses. I love to stop down and get those wonderful Sunstars. And I found a pretty good wide spot on the side of the road where I was able to pull my Prius off, and I walked over into the woods and found my way down to the edge of the creek. There was a really cool tree with some of the most beautiful yellow leaves that I've ever seen, and I took this shot. Oops, F that one up. Nope, this shot. And before I jumped back in the car, I took this shot looking back up the road. And you can see it was just an absolutely gorgeous day. Such fond memories. As I continued up the road, though, I made one of my most interesting kind of discoveries, and which led to some really cool shots. There was a really old bridge going across the road, which looked like it had been kind of tied up with barbed wire, right? But there was a gap, looked like you could kind of get through. And there was a really old, I'm talking, house falling apart off in the distance. And I didn't have the courage or recklessness to actually approach the house. There was a no trespassing sign posted. So I took some shots from the bridge after playing the stupidest game of limbo trying to get through the barbed wire. And these were some of the shots taken from the bridge. dimensional stability. Aerocolor IV negative film 2460 has an abrasion-resistant emulsion and an anti-halation undercoat and dyed gel backing. What's even more interesting, though, is what Kodak has to say about the uses of this film. Kodak says that Kodak Aerocolor IV negative film 2460 is a general-use medium to high altitude aerial mapping and aerial reconnaissance photography film. It's suited for geological, pollution, archaeological, crop and forestry studies, traffic control, city planning, railway, highway, and hydraulic engineering, oceanography, and remote sensing, as well as other areas where photogrammetry is used. What a word, photogrammetry. So what I'm getting from all that is this sounds like a landscape film to me. All of that sounds like this film would be a heck of a landscape film, and that's why I put this film to use on my day looking at the fall, and that's why I put this film to use on a fall day in Kentucky. I knew that I was going to primarily be shooting landscape shots, and this is a film that lends itself really to that application. And the way that I kind of look at the film stock, it looks a lot like Ektar 100. Perhaps it's not as saturated as Ektar 100, but a little more shifted towards the red end of the spectrum. So there's going to be a lot more red in the images, but the image on the whole is going to be a lot less saturated. But otherwise, I would use this film about exactly like I would use Ektar 100. It's going to be a film that's going to be great for sunsets. It's great for fall colors. I probably wouldn't do much portraiture with it. I think it's probably going to have some weird skin tones, although not to the severe degree that you get with Ektar. But I think that these companies, packaging Luminar 100, Color 100, Film Washi X, these companies that are repackaging this Aerocolor 4, I think this is a really good, useful product. And in a world where we don't have all that many choices available to us as for color negative film, I think it's great to have another option out there for us to experiment with. But let me know in the comments what you thought about my images taken with Luminar 100. And after watching this video, if you're interested in more fall photography and looking at a film that's maybe towards the cooler end of the spectrum, check out last year's fall photography video where I shot a roll of Velvia 50. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.